G'day there guys, wannabe lawyer Markee here, back at it again with another episode of r/LegalAdvice. Now if you love today's content, please smash a like on the video, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's bloody good content. Posted by user HypnoFedX, titled, Neighbor likes to shoot guns, bullets are hitting my mother's house, police won't help because he's on his property when he is shooting, this is in South Carolina. Hey everyone. Long-time reader, first-time kvetcher. I always wondered when something would happen in my personal life to get me to post here. So I don't have the talent in MS Paint that some others do, but the setup is pretty simple. My mother lives in a home in a planned housing development, and her home is on a row on the exterior of the overall property being developed. Behind her is a large drainage, which is probably 200 to 300 feet wide or so. 6 months ago, my mum moved into a new house, and it's been pretty nice. However, in the last few weeks, she's been hearing sounds from the woods across the drainage behind her house. She asked the neighbors about the sounds, and they told her that it was a neighbor living over that way who likes to shoot wild pigs, rabbits, squirrels, and other assorted varmints. Apparently, they've all gotten used to this. For the last month, my mum tells me she occasionally hears something hit her house, but could never figure out what. One night last week, she's on her back porch eating dinner when she hears the a-hole neighbor shooting and then hears the thing hitting her house sound, after which a small piece of metal lands on her table. She takes it to a friendly neighbor later, who tells her that it's a .22 caliber bullet. After soliciting everyone in the world for advice, she calls the police. A police officer arrives, asks her some questions, and then at the end tells her that she probably won't like what she's going to hear, but since a-hole neighbor is shooting guns on his own property, he is legally in the clear. Police officer leaves, and my mum talks to the growing crowd of friendly neighbors around her, wondering what's going on. She talks about it, and they confirm her story. Apparently, the police have been getting complaints for years about bullets hitting homes and never do anything because multiple neighbors have had the same thing happen before. I really can't believe that my mother doesn't have any recourse here. She hasn't been hurt or injured, but why would we wait for that to happen? She lives in a neighborhood with a lot of young families as well. Here is the challenge. My mum loves to solicit advice, but is terrible at following it. After the bullet incident, she called about 7 different people, not including me for some reason, asking them what she should do. Every single person suggested she should call the police. She did call them after all other 7 people told her to, although it's probably just because she ran out of other people to call, and not because she thought the advice she'd gotten was sound. I really need to know what I can do on her behalf, because if I tell her to do something, it's probably not going to happen, unless it's what she would have done anyway. Update 1. Apparently when she called the police, they told her to call the sheriff, which she did. And apparently the person sent was a deputy. She still has his business card, and when he left, the gaggle of neighbors was already congregating and asking questions. Again, this is apparently an ongoing issue, and he said that there will be an investigation and it'll take some time. I'm wondering if that's code for, there won't be an investigation, and I'm hoping you forget about this and stop calling. Either way, she's going to wait and see if anything happens. I told her to give it a week, and then call the sheriff's office back to see if there's been any updates. Another Ania says, we had a similar problem. The person that was most interested, and was ultimately able to solve the problem, was the game warden. I'm in Ohio, not South Carolina, but if he's shooting things out of season, the game warden should be interested. I am not a lawyer. Many cities, towns, etc. have ordinances that make it illegal to shoot within city limits. My South Carolina small city does. Check into that. I'd also escalate to the duty sergeant, shift captain, and police chief. Next, to the city or county elected district rep, and she can also bill the neighbors for any repairs and take them to small claims if they refuse to pay. Even if the law allows them to shoot, they are liable for damages from their actions. To piggyback on this, the city and county may allow shooting on your own property, but within restrictions. I live in VA, but my county ordinances mandate we shoot X yards away from a street and must be X yards away from a dwelling, not our own. One of the other people in this thread mentioned the idea of contacting a game warden. If he's shooting animals out of season, and he most likely is, even if it's on his own property, it would be a violation and he could get in trouble. Might solve the problem. The other one is to see if he is in violation of any other city or county ordinances. My dad used this one time on a guy that was not controlling the weeds on his property. In Iowa, where he was from at the time, you have to keep some weeds like thistles under control, and if you do not, the county can take care of it for you and send you the bill. Let's just say that we never had a problem after that with the guy. Just a thought. Update. Neighbor likes to shoot guns, bullets are hitting my mother's house, police won't help because he's on his property when shooting. Things are currently quite confusing. Starting off, I'd like to reiterate something I hedged in my original request for help. I really need to know what I can do on her behalf, because if I tell my mother to do something, it's probably not going to happen unless it's what she would have done anyway. After a few more conversations with her, I noticed my mother was being very inconsistent with details. Exactly how many bullets had hit her home, when this had happened, details from her conversation with the sheriff's deputy, exactly who had called the sheriff's office, etc. I decided I very much needed to not do anything on her behalf, lest the information I give to law enforcement be not just second-hand, but 50% inaccurate. We did talk more though, and I passed on a lot of the information that was shared with us, and she was very thankful, so that's nice. She called her county's game warden and was able to speak with him directly. He told her that the fact she actually had bullets changed everything. Unfortunately, as far as I know, she hasn't followed up with his office, and that's where things with the game warden stopped. She also said that her neighbors escalated with the sheriff, and 2 detectives came, took statements, collected evidence, and said that there was an open investigation, but did say that the evidence seemed pretty strong on the side of my mother and her neighbors. I am not aware of any follow-up in regards to this, nor do I know if they actually talked to my mother or took the bullet fragments that she collected. By the way, I'm positive that either someone will PM me or post that I should be concerned with my mother's lucidity because she is so incredibly inconsistent with details. This is just how she is. She taught English and creative writing and tends to fill in details with guesses anytime she talks about anything in narrative form. When she doesn't understand an important point, she makes an explanation up that seems reasonable to her. I'm in my mid-30s, and she's been like this my whole life. I've no doubt that the whole story she's told me is true. She's an honest person, really, but she's frequently an unreliable narrator. Luckily, I know her well enough that I can generally figure out how true something she tells me is on an overall basis, and which parts are likely specious. I've heard nothing else in several months, either investigative progress or new bullet fragments. C'est la vie. I am hopeful that there is progress I simply don't know about, because it seems her neighbors with small children are much more on the up and up with checking in with and pressuring law enforcement to help. Posted by user Snob Black, titled, "My 68-year-old grandmother was born under strange circumstances and doesn't have a birth certificate. Hello, new to posting on Reddit, so please let me know if I've broken any rules or am in the wrong sub. My grandmother was born in 1951 in California and was most likely born out of wedlock. She knows who her family says her father was, but has no idea who her mother was. She's trying to get a birth certificate, but has been running into complications. Her first step was to get her passport. She has an affidavit from her father that he wrote for her when she was 15 in order for her to get a job. She also has a notarized letter from one of her only living relatives left, claiming her identity. However, the passport office has told her it's not enough information, and that she needs to find information from before she was 5 years old. They recommend Ancestry.com or going to find a US census from when she was born. Ancestry is a little bit of an issue because she doesn't have any family alive who might know her mother's name, and she genuinely isn't even sure about her father. Should she use her father's anyway? Does anyone have any idea of how she could get more information to provide her identity? Please let me know any thoughts, or if I need to provide more information. Thanks, Redditors. And to be clear, she's not an immigrant. She has an Arizona ID because it's one of the few states that allowed her to use her old California ID to renew. She currently lives in Nevada. This sounds a bit like a mystery puzzle. Her Arizona ID, it uses her father's name or her married name. Does she still have her California ID? That, I'm assuming, uses her father's name. You say she doesn't have any idea about her mother's name? Who did she live with growing up? Does she remember attending any schools? They often have records that, while they might not work for this, might give a lead. Religion? If she was raised in a faith and can pin down where she was raised, churches might have records, like baptism or Sunday school. Is it possible that her birth was never officially registered? I'm a bit confused about the father giving some kind of letter at 15. Children born out of wedlock at that time didn't generally have contact with a father unless the father remained part of their life, which he obviously did. And OP says, "Thanks for responding. Her Arizona ID uses her married name. I don't think she kept the California one, but if she has it, does that help? She lived with her grandparents growing up. They were on her mother's side from what she was told. She and her living relative believe her mother might have been someone she was told was her cousin, if that matters. I didn't even think about schools. We will look for some information there. Not really religious, but I'll ask if she remembers. I don't think her birth was ever registered. She sent for it in Los Angeles, California, where she was told she was born, but they had no records. She even sent in various spellings of her first name. Her father was in her life occasionally, mostly to provide money. He had married and had other children when she was growing up, and remembers being around him. They weren't all that close though, from what she tells me. You need to focus your search on where she was raised, I think. You have her grandparents' names possibly? And their location? If they were her mother's family, that might give you a name. I'm thinking that you have to consider that her birth was never registered. It happens, unfortunately, and in those cases, the government normally wants things like doctors, school, and religious records. Does she have a social security number? Gotcha. That makes sense. Yes, she has their names and even their last address. She lived with them until she married. The school seems like a great lead. She does have her high school's information, so I'm sure that can get us somewhere. And yes, she does have a social security number. She provided that to the passport office as well. Census records from 1940 are all online, and records from 1950 will be online next year. Can you find her grandparents' census records? That might provide the names of all their children, which would narrow the search for her mother's name. Ah, thank you. I didn't know that. I'm going to see her and help her with all of this weekend, so I'll see if we can find them in there. I'm not a lawyer, but a genealogy nerd. FamilySearch.org has an index of California births. If you have any idea of the maiden name of your mother, that will make things much easier. When searching, just focus on the surname. Her birth could have been logged as baby girl or female surname. With the census, do you know where your grandmother lived in 1960? If so, she can request info from the 1960 census for $65. At this link here, census.gov/topics/population/genealogy/agesearch.html. Do you know where she went to school? Try requesting records from the school district. If she went to school in LA, I imagine LAUSD has a labyrinth of records, but they might be able to find stuff. I know NYC has a ton of records, maybe LA would be similar. If she was adopted, do you have paperwork for that? This is an interesting case. Has she talked to an immigration attorney? No answers for that one, unfortunately. Update. My 68-year-old grandmother was born under strange circumstances and does not have a birth certificate. Hello everyone. 11 months ago, I posted here asking for help for my grandmother, who hasn't had a birth certificate all her life and was trying to get a passport. She called me today and her passport was in the mail. I just wanted to thank everyone for their help and all of the wonderful advice. She has been waiting for this for years, and it was such a special moment. Thank you all, we truly appreciate it. Posted by user SkyDancer572. Titled, Should I Pay My Grandmother $6,000 in Cash? I'm not sure what this would fall under, but it has to do with wills and estates. Debts, maybe? Someone said I should post here, so here it goes. So this is a super long story. I'll add a TLDR at the bottom if you don't want to read the whole thing. The characters, names have been changed, are Laura, my great-grandmother, Jen, one of Lorraine's daughters, and my grandmother, Johnny, second child of Lorraine and my aunt, Kirsten, my mum, Jake, Kirsten's husband and my stepdad, Jeff, the lawyer dealing with the inheritance issues the prior lawyer left behind, OP is me. And there's 2 wills. Will 1, before I was born and before the fighting. This will was dedicated to Jen, Johnny, and Kirsten. Will 2, this was the newer will that the lawyer screwed up. It was for OP, Johnny, and Kirsten. Background. I have a great-grandmother named Laura. She passed away in 2016, and Will 2 left everything to me, Kirsten, and Johnny. Laura got into a fight with her daughter, Jen, several years before she died. As she got older, they kinda made up, but the will was set in stone. Unfortunately, after she passed, we found the lawyer screwed up and can't be held legally responsible for fudging up the will. So now we had to revert to Will 1. We tried fighting it, but no luck. Soon we found out that if Jen was willing to uphold the will, she could sign her inheritance over to me, and all would be as it should. She was greedy and said no, so I get nothing. Good day, sir. We came up with another plan, which she agreed to, split it 4 ways so we all get something. Kirsten, my mum, said, "Why should I be punished for the lawyer's mistake?" Yes, she actually said that to her only daughter. So in the end, I got nothing. Johnny cared for me deeply, so he had her will legally changed so I would inherit everything if she passed. Well, a year later, she did pass due to complications after a surgery. It was a horrible time for me, and I was super depressed. We picked up a plot of land and buried her. An agreement with the plot of land is that 4 people can be buried there: Johnny, Jen, Kirsten, and Jake. Each paid 1/4 of the total, $12,000. Jen said she would pay if Kirsten and Jake paid their parts along with Johnny. I got Johnny's share of Laura's estate as it wasn't passed out yet. Morbid how someone else had to pass before I could get any semblance of my first inheritance. Now, Kirsten, Jake, and Jen said I made an agreement to pay Jen back with the inheritance I got, and Kirsten and Jake would pay me back over time. I don't remember this agreement. Jeff needed signatures, and Kirsten and Jen wouldn't get off their butts to sign so that I could get the money in the first place. Now that I have the money, they want me to pay $6,000 in cash so Jen can keep her SSI and government benefits. She also got a check for over $4,000 when I got my money. I have a son now and no job. I had one, but due to being high risk, I had to quit. And my fiancé is between jobs, but due to pandemic, he hasn't heard anything back. We need this money, but I came up with a plan. Laura had stock in Universal, not actually Universal, but something similar, that was split amongst the 3. But Johnny and Kirsten bought Jen out of it a while ago. Now it's split between me and Kirsten. I offered to buy it from my mum so that Kirsten can take the check and pay cash to Jen, as that would make everyone sort of happy. I got all the stock, Kirsten paid half her debt back, and Jenny got half the money. I had to drive back to Washington from Connecticut, not the actual states, because of a medical emergency. I told Jen this, and she says that I'm screwing her over. There is no proof anyone would pay me back had I just handed the cash over. and now she's acting like I need to pay her. I don't get the luxury of Social Security money or benefits from the state. I have a son that I need to care for, and he's expecting me to throw away $6,000 I will most likely never see again. She threatened to get a lawyer to get the money, but there is no evidence that I owe her anything. It was a verbal contract, but that happened over a year and a half ago that I have zero recollection of. I'm going to read the TLDR because that is a very confusing story. TLDR, my grandmother screwed me out of $27,000 in inheritance. She just got a check for over $4,000, and now she wants me to give her $6,000 in cash so she can avoid having to report it to the IRS. And there's nothing promising I'll ever get paid back. Should I give her the money? That's over half of what I have left. I only got a check for $15,000 and have been buying much needed baby stuff and paying for food and bills. I just paid $2,000 in bills for my son's cord blood storage. Just off the TLDR, why are you giving someone who stole $27,000 from you an additional $6,000? Why do you care if she has IRS trouble? OP says, when the will reverted and I got cut out, she could have legally signed the third back to me, but instead she kept it. She said that I'd be her sole beneficiary because of how things went down. I would get 2/3 instead of 1/3 or 1/4. I'm worried that if I don't give her the money, she won't name me her sole beneficiary and I will lose out again. You have no guarantee of inheriting anything at all. She also sounds poor. The odds of there being something left to inherit are pretty slim. Don't throw away good money after bad. 90% of this is irrelevant. All this comes down to is, do you have an agreement to pay $6,000? If you had a written agreement, they can come after you. If you didn't have a written agreement, tell them to show you proof of the agreement or that you aren't paying them anything. If they sue, retain an attorney. People threaten to sue way more often than they do. There is no written document or evidence. There's actually more evidence that my mother owes her than there is of me even being in the room when they decided on the plan. Then just stop engaging. Tell them you won't be paying them anything. If they actually hire an attorney and you get court paperwork, get your own attorney. People threaten to sue much more often than they actually do when there is no proof. Update: should I pay my grandmother $6,000? So I went over some of the documentation I received from the lawyer, and it's a mess. There's random withdrawals, money missing in places that suddenly appears somewhere else, bills taken specifically from the state of my aunt and not my great-grandmother, which they should have been. There is vague wording, money handed out beforehand, and a whole bunch of other things. It smells fishy for sure. Anyway, now I'm debating to hire a lawyer, but I don't know which kind would deal with this. Is it a family matter? An accounting matter? Where should I go to help with this matter? And apparently it wasn't $40,000 like I had thought, it's near $60,000. Edit: I'm in California, but all of this was filed in Massachusetts. You need a probate lawyer based in Massachusetts. That's what I'm afraid of. I don't plan to go back to Massachusetts anytime soon, so everything would be over the phone, and I'm wary of that. There's really nothing much different than in person. Usually you'd have a consult in person, then they take care of things for you with some phone updates and signing forms. And there really isn't much else information to go off here. If we get another update later we will, but damn, I thought you guys would like that story because it's just huge. Posted by user Throwaway120798. Titled, Being Prosecuted and Sued for Not Reporting a Crime That I Was a Victim of. I, 34 male, ran away from home when I was 16 to escape serious abuse from my parents, mostly my father. My father isn't a good person. He was very abusive to me and my mum. He's also a crook, the kind that cheats, steals from vulnerable people, doesn't pay his taxes, and so on. I haven't had any contact with my father from the day I left home. I never reported the abuse to the police. I only told a few people at the time, and I'm not sure they believed me anyway. My mother died shortly after I left, and my father married twice more. He has kids with both his second and third wives. I don't know the wives or their kids at all, not even their names. I heard through a relative that my father was arrested 2 or so weeks ago. I didn't know the charges against him. This was to be expected one day or another, so I didn't give it any further thought. 3 days ago, though, I was called by a very aggressive woman who claims to be his current wife. She was understandably upset that he was arrested. She accuses him of abusing their kids. The woman also told me that he stole from her, talked some relatives into investing in shady schemes of his, then kept the money, and a variety of other accusations. I don't know which of these crimes he's been arrested for. The woman who called was very angry. She says that I enabled my father by not reporting the abuse I went through. I have no idea who told her my father abused me. She said I knew how he was and didn't tell anyone, and because of that he was free to marry her, abuse her and their kids, and steal from her family. She said that she reported me to the police for knowingly enabling a criminal. She also said that she would take me to court for the money she lost, her and her kids suffering, everything. She said all I had to do was denounce him, and not doing so is a serious crime, and I'm going to pay for it because I knew. I didn't think she was serious, but yesterday I had a missed call from the police department of the city where my father lives. They say I need to call them back, and it's about him. It seems she made good on her threats and told the police about me, so now I'm very worried. I didn't know one could get in trouble for not reporting abuse. Should I call them back, or is there a risk for me? And what can this woman sue me for exactly? Is there anything I should do about it? You don't have a legal obligation to warn people about the abuse you suffered. You don't need to speak to the police if you don't want to, assuming you're in the US. It's unclear what she reported or why they're calling you. It may be entirely unrelated to her threats. Yes, I'm in the US, South Carolina. I wonder what the police want from me though. They're from the city where my father lives. I've never been there, so it has to be about him. If they're investigating your father for abusing his children, it makes sense to call his older children to investigate whether he's done it before. Failing to report the abuse you experienced isn't illegal, but if you're concerned, you can have a lawyer call the detective back. It's also possible that your stepmother is unhinged enough to have someone call you pretending to be a detective. OP, do not call the number that was left for you to call. Look up the non-emergency phone number for the police in the city they said they were calling from and ask for the detective. If the call is legitimate, this will get you to them. But if it was someone pretending to be a detective to scare you on the behalf of the father's wife, you can skip that whole experience. And OP says, I hadn't thought of that. And back up the voicemail, just in case it is her. It could help as evidence if she tries harassing you in the future. This is plainly emotional lashing out and looking for someone to blame, rather than a set of claims based in law. There's a small handful of places and circumstances where people can be criminally punished for not reporting felony crimes, or not reporting child abuse, or civilly sued for failing a professional obligation to warn about imminent serious violence. None of those apply to a 16-year-old runaway, or to crimes that occurred 18 years ago, or to crimes or torts committed by a third party years or decades after you last communicated with him. The city police phone call is more likely for ordinary investigatory purposes about crimes that your father is alleged to have committed rather than any investigation of you. Anywhere in the USA, you are well within your ordinary 5th and 6th Amendment rights to not answer those calls, or to tell the investigators a flat, I will not answer any questions without the advice of my attorney. A more practical answer, if you can commit to strictly limiting your comments, would be something to the effect of, I left home when I was 16, I don't know anything about my father's conduct after the day I left, and I will not answer any more questions without the advice of my attorney. If you are served notice of a lawsuit, you must respond to it, and should hire an attorney to help. Dismissal will almost certainly follow, but angry pros plaintiffs file groundless lawsuits all the time, and you need to respond to them to limit the possible damage. OP says, I currently live in South Carolina, spent my childhood in GA before I ran away, and my father currently lives in Florida. I never had any participation in my father's illegal activities. I would be willing to talk to the police if it helps the investigations against my father. I know I have a right not to answer, but doesn't it look like I'm guilty of something if I ask for a lawyer? No, it doesn't make you look guilty, it makes you look smart. The police know it's stupid to talk to them. Update: being sued for not reporting abuse I suffered. The police in the city where my father lives called me again. They told me it was about my father, and I answered that he's out of my life and I don't know anything about him or his crimes, and I haven't talked to him in over 18 years. I thought that would be the end of it, but it turns out that my POS father used my identity in some of his fraudulent schemes, which is also why his wife was after me initially. She thought I was aware of it and complicit. I started crapping bricks, so I took your advice and lawyered up, and thankfully we were able to prove that it was identity theft easily. Actually, the police had no trouble believing me because he has stolen a lot of other identities. They also encouraged me to come forward about the violence to add even more weight to his other kids' accusations. The officers were kind and understanding, and they told me where to get help if the process is too hard on me. The third wife harassed me for a few weeks to take her rage at me, and then accused me of being irresponsible and a coward for not reporting my father's abuse. She stopped communicating with me, so I imagine we're good. Anyway, if she sues me, I have a lawyer now. Alright guys, that's where I'm going to end today's video. I really do hope you enjoyed it, and maybe even learned something that you didn't know before. If you haven't already, please do feel free to click that like button, as it really does help me in the YouTube algorithm. And if you haven't already and you love today's video, please feel free to subscribe. I would love it a lot. Also, big shout out to all my Patreon members and channel subscribers. You guys are all up on the screen right now. I love you. I love your faces. Also, I love seeing you guys all chatting down below in the comments. It brightens my day to see the stories that you guys share and just the kind words you guys always have for my videos, as well as everyone else in the videos. I love you too. But honestly, your ongoing support means the world to me, and I just love it so much that you guys are able to support a career for myself that I invest so much time into. And you guys honestly motivate me to work harder each and every day to put more love into the videos for you guys. If you guys have watched this far in the video and you haven't already subscribed on Patreon or become a channel member, that's cool, you don't have to, but there are links down below. You can donate any amount of money, pledge that any month, cancel whenever. I'm completely cool with it. It's just there for you to support me if you'd like to go the extra mile. And I'll go the extra mile for you guys by putting out new amazing content every single day. With that said guys, I really hope you have a good day, night, sleep, bath, time at work, whatever you're up to today. This has been Markee. I'll see you in the next amazing video. Bye.